We are privileged to be here this evening and get to know more about the great Julius Evola, a bedrock and a capstone on our high political philosophy, revolutionary conservatism. And today we have a speaker with us eminently prepared for the task, Dr. Marius Govinda.
Thank you, Norman. Thank you for having me, and good evening. Please. I'll start the talk today with an excerpt, a small quotation in Italian, his native language, Julius Evola's native language, from a very small book called Orientations. This is important because it brings us directly to the center of Evola's concern for the world and mostly for the Europe as he knows it. Chi si trova in mezzo ad un mondo di rovine. I'll say it in English. You are in the midst of a world of ruins. Questo non va dimenticato. This should not be forgotten. E la misura perciò può essere ancora salvato dipende unicamente o meno di uomini che sanno stare ancora in piedi in mezzo a queste rovine. Meaning, and the measure for what can still be saved depends solely or not on men who know how to stand still in the midst of these ruins. Non per dettar formule, ma per essere esempi, non andando incontro alle demagogia e al materialismo delle masse, ma per destare forme diverse di sensibilità e di interesse. Not to dictate formulas, but to be examples. Not going to meet the demagogy and materialism of the masses, but to reawaken different forms of sensibility and interest. This is Julius Evola. I got to know Julius to Norman. I was on a stroll somewhere very close here, actually. And at the time, I was studying esoteric Hinduism. I was doing my first master's. I had spent some time in India doing Ayurveda, studying Indian medicine and yoga. And we just happened to cross paths. And Norman introduced me to Julius. You should study Julius. And so I did. And this was something like 20 years ago, Norman. And what a man. What a man. What's fascinating about Julius is his consistency. His consistency. Why? His writing career spans 50 years. 50 years of a writing career. He published something like between 30 to 40 books, over 1,000 articles. Phenomenal. And the span of his writing, the compass, is indeed very wide. You have, at one end, his deliberations on Tantra and on Buddhism. On the other, he has his politics on the far right and his politics on the men among the ruins, cavalcare la tigre, ride the tiger, etc., etc. But what is fascinating about Julius is that though the span is indeed very wide, and the paths that he comes across during his own journey, that we'll see what this journey is about, there is a consistency in which what he does is understood by Julius, by the Baron, as coming from above and being directed towards the above. And that is cardinal to his work. You'll find that everywhere. Everywhere. What do I mean? What do I mean by it? He feels that what is coming to him through his pen is coming from the above, meaning it's coming from the absolute. It's coming from something, rather not something, but rather an aspect, a metaphysical quality which is timeless, which is beyond that which changes, that which is of absolute value. And it is directed again towards the above. Whatever he does, the way we should live, according to Evola, is that we should be directed towards this absolute, not towards the masses, not to be involved in the materialism of everyday life. So here we find a true philosopher, in the way the philosophy, as Pierre Hadot, a famous historian of philosophy, understands as that philosopher who sees philosophy as a way of life. Not a philosophy where one sits down, writes papers, publishes, and is just an armchair critic, but a philosophy which works and is absolutely essential in his life and ours. So let's return to this short intro. And the first thing he says is that we are in the midst of a world of ruins. Now, isn't that drastic? Don't you think so? Some of us might say, well, this is a bit too much, world of ruins. But if one had to understand what Julius is about, the ruins he's talking of is the fact that what is absolute has been rendered obscure. It has been forgotten. This is what ruins is about, this word ruins. So, when I remember just a few months ago, a friend of mine phoned me up and was a bit uneasy and perplexed, knowing that I am very much into his work, Julius' work, and he asked for some advice as to from which one of these parts of these books should I start? Which one? And that really depends, according to Julius, your disposition. If you're disposed to Tantra, then you should start with his work on L'uomo come potenza, or the yoke of power. He has a particular book in which he describes the yoga of the wet part. What does it mean, the yoga of the wet part? The yoga of involvement, an active involvement in the vicissitudes of everyday life. Likewise, he describes what Tantra is, the various power points in the body, the various chakra, how they are involved, what initiation is in yoga. That's one part, if you're really involved in that aspect of Julius Evola. One must not forget that at around the age of 23 years of age, Julius was passing through a very difficult stage in life. So difficult that he was contemplating suicide. He was so distraught at seeing the world around him crumble. His friend committed suicide. But by chance, or I would say divine providence, he came across a Buddhist text of the Theravada school, and that changed his life completely. It changed it so much that these very values, principles of what comes to us comes from the above, and whatever we do, we should direct to the above, is directly attributed to his initiation in the Buddhist tradition. That doesn't make him a Buddhist. He says this explicitly. He is not a Buddhist at all. Evola is not a Buddhist, and he's not a Buddhist scholar either. But it doesn't mean that he doesn't have a respect to Buddhism, which he does. And in fact, he has a book also on Buddhism, the part of the awakening, something like that. Why awakening? Because this is what is required. And this is where this civilization is hurting us most. I'm glad to have all of you here around me, because once we become so involved in the materialism of everyday life, in the consumer society, it is so much difficult to awaken to the notion of the transcendent in everyday life, to what is above, to what is timeless, to what is in principle above everything else, to what is not material. So it is an affront to our deep spirituality. Now, two important texts that I would like to develop today are Men Among the Ruins. That's one text. And Cavalcare la Tigre, Ride the Tiger is another. In Men Among the Ruins, it is a wet part. What does that mean? A wet part is a part of active involvement in the world, in which one gets totally involved but remains like detached from it, not be involved in it. You live in the world, but you don't belong to the world, as the saying goes. We live in the world, we carry on with our lives, we do what must be done, we have families, we go to work, but we are not soulfully involved in the currents of the world. In Cavalcare la Tigre, The book of Cavalcare la Tigre, that book is phenomenal, and I suggest that everyone should have it and read it very, very slowly. And I will give you the basic framework for you to understand his writing in this book, in Ride the Tiger. And this I will do today. He opens his, to me, Magnus Opus, his major work, with this question: what kind of conduct, what form of existence is appropriate in the circumstances for a particular human type? So, what type of conduct, what behavior, what mode of existence in these circumstances should be adopted for a particular human type? What does that mean? What does it mean, a particular human type? So here we have three factors: conduct, circumstances, and class. The particular human type is about class, or better, race, according to Evola. What does that mean? What is race? Circumstances. What circumstances? What are the ruins he's talking of? And behavior, conduct. These are the three pillars that inform Evola throughout his 50-year span of writing. Let's start with the circumstances. So, if we had to really examine the conditions we live in today, and that were present even during his time, pre-war, which were based mostly on his involvement in politics, in fascism, in attempting to bring about some transformation in the politics of his day, and post-war, where he modifies very slightly his metaphysics, his understanding of higher political philosophy to the general world. What are these circumstances? Basically, these circumstances are those in which the whole edifice of society is directed towards one thing, and one thing alone, and that is economy. This is what he is noting in his writings as ruins. Ruins means that the whole edifice, the whole activity of each individual is directed towards the appeasement of the senses, towards the generation of wealth beyond what is necessary. This is very important, beyond what is necessary. And it has to do with the materialism which has gone beyond all bounds. These are the circumstances. As a summary, one can state that our society suffers from three sins, if you will. One is that our society has become sedated through a steady drip of entertainment. And it's getting worse So much so that even the young ones have to live with their mobile very close by. The first thing you do when you wake up is you look at your damn mobile phone. So it's a form of manipulation. But one, we are sedated. Two, we have a problem with a certain emptiness in our lives. Time flies, and when you look back, you say, but what was my life about? I have given so many years of toil, of earning so much money, investing most of it, bringing up the kids, going for breaks, holidays. But what is the meaning of all this? What is the meaning? There is this emptiness in our hearts, and we try to appease this through this sedation, through this current and continuous stimulation, obviously at a price, because that requires a lot of trade, a lot of commerce. This stillness has become very, very small. We can't stay still and just be. And this is from where the Buddhist doctrine has informed Julius, this aspect of stillness in one's life. So we have there's a numbness in our society. There is this emptiness, and there is this anxiety. You see this, it's so obvious. This frantic, hurried, empty rushing about without a step back and thinking and really critically examining your life. But what is actually going on? What is going on in my life, in the life of my family? Am I present for my kids? Am I present in society? Or am I part of the cog, a cog in the wheel, so to say? So these are the circumstances. And it's very hard to beat. It's very hard not to recognize that, yes, franticness has taken over. It's very obvious. We have become sedated through this constant stimulation, this entertainment. It's very obvious. All you have to do is just take a step back and just be. Be one with yourself. So these are the circumstances Evola is about. Next, we have this class or race, which is very particular because Evola is not addressing every human person in Cavalcare la Tigre, but he is addressing only those who are in the world but do not belong to the world. They feel like in his words, like they belong to a different race from his contemporaries, from your contemporaries. You feel you don't belong here. And he's addressing these people. And who are they? Who are these particular human type? What is this typology? And he identifies three main categories. The first category are those who are activists in the political arena. They are warriors, noble in stature. They keep on fighting, though in lost positions, in his own words. These are exactly his words. You keep on fighting in lost positions. But they remain truthful, they remain principled. What are the principles? The principles of tradition. I'll come to this. We'll return to the idea of tradition very soon. So this is the first group, the activists, the noble aristocracy, the warrior class. In the Hinduism, so-called Hinduism, it's called the Kshatriya, the warrior, the noble aristocrats. That's the first class. The second class, so the first class are those that are involved in the wet part. Why wet? Because they're involved in it. Okay? The second category are those who are mostly disposed to a life of seclusion. They are those who do not feel they are to be involved in the world in any way. They are privileged in that they have all the material comforts, rather necessities, and they stay aloof, away from it all. They just be with that which is transcendent, away from everything, not involved in the political arena, not involved in family life. That's the second class. And then he has the third class, of which he is an example, Evola is an example. And these are the intellectuals, the very, very few who hold on to the principle, who write books, comment, be and write what being is in parallel to the principles of tradition. Not really given to the benefits of what they write. They are not concerned with the fruits of labor, as they say in the Gita. Now, what's the Gita? In a particular text, Evola appropriates certain passages from sacred scripture, from the Buddhist tradition, from the Hindu tradition, from the Nordic traditions, and one of them is the Gita. And I feel that those of you who really want to know Evola must have a read, especially of chapter 2 of the Gita, in which it is described that a war is going on, and this war is a deadly one. It's on a field called Kurukshetra, and here that which is transcendent, called Krishna, is mentoring the Kshatriya, the noble aristocrat, Arjuna. Arjuna wouldn't like to fight the war, and he brings all these excuses that he doesn't want to kill, it's better not to be involved in the war because it's not proper, and all these stories, and Krishna obviously listens compassionately. And in one verse, Krishna explains to Arjuna that you, as a warrior, as an aristocrat, you have the rights to work. But you don't have the rights to the fruit of the work. Meaning what? Karma phala heitur bhur. Meaning what? That you do your duty. If you're a warrior, if you're an aristocrat, you must do your duty. As a warrior, as an aristocrat, you must revolt. It's in your nature to do so. But do not be concerned with the fruits of your labor. That is up to Krishna, it's not up to you. It's not up to you at all. You do your duty and do it to the best of your ability. And here's the catch, and this is important. If we, as Kshatriyas, were to be taken by the outcome of what we do, we lose on our skills. Because our center is more in the future, in anticipating the results, rather than what we're doing at present. And this is what Buddhism is about too, isn't it? About the present moment of being, of treating every moment as if that moment is an eternity. Because actually this is all we have, right? What's past is past. The future is yet to come. All that we have today is this. So the first class, they do know that they are doing their duties in lost positions. They know this. It's very obvious. With this franticness of life, the sedation we've talked about, and it's getting worse, not better. But it's their duty to keep on the fight, to stand for what is in principle, to stand for what is tradition. So, we've discussed the circumstances, we've discussed the class of people, of which there are three, and now we come to the third, which is our conduct. What behavior? How should we act in the world? And this ties, as you see, very closely to this verse where Krishna is mentoring Arjuna and telling him, look, you have the rights to work, but you don't have the rights to the fruit of your work at any one time. So, what are the principles that Evola, throughout this 50-year period, keeps on returning to time and time again? What are these principles which the Kshatriya keep on as their yardstick? They put it there in front, never deviate, always in their mind and in their heart. What are these principles? What are the principles that those that prefer the path of sannyas, of renunciation, those that prefer seclusion, what are the principles that animate their spiritual life? What are the principles that the writers, the philosophers, write about? and animate the writing. What are these principles? And this Evola calls tradition with a capital T. So, before I carry on, do you have a question you would like to pose and maybe clarify on my part? Okay, fine.
Actually, I have a question. We talked about the three types of people to whom Evola was referring. Is it possible that of those three, there could be, for instance, a merging of one or two or all three categories? For instance, you could have the warrior class also being the intellectual, and vice versa. Or is it distinctively one class?
No, not at all. Thank you very much. It's a very important question, really. No, these categories nowadays in our time, which is defined as the Dark Age. This is the age of darkness. According to the history which informs Evola through his Eastern studies, this age is known as the Dark Age, or the Age of Iron, or the Kali Yuga. Kali meaning dark, Yuga meaning an aeon. In the Kali Yuga, these boundaries tend to merge. They're not as defined. But knowing that life is short and the skills required require so much effort to develop, I think Evola would suggest for us to keep to one definite path. Like, if you're a renunciate, please don't get involved in family life. Just do your thing. And that's it. You see? Writing about these, the principles and how to apply the principles to this age of the Kali Yuga is a huge task. Everything is against you. Everything. And we'll see what is against you now. So, what's against us? The principles of tradition would tell us that the idea of history as progress is off the mark, totally off the mark. This is not a period of progress at all. It's a decadent era. There is no progress towards something higher. It's a fall, and all traditions, all deep spiritual traditions would tell us that actually our condition is a condition of fall, not a condition of progress, where virtue, which was highly developed in the Golden Age, eventually became less and less. And now, instead of virtue staying on 4 feet, now virtue is on just 1 foot. Okay? So in the Golden Age, the bull is standing on 4 feet. In the second age, the age of the Kshatriya, I think I need some. Okay, thank you. In the age of the Kshatriya, the sense of loyalty, the sense of obedience is notable. And this obedience is towards the principle, towards that which is sovereign, towards that which is above, not to that which is below. You see? In the third age is the age of the bourgeoisie. is the age of the merchant, where everything and all is about commerce. Everything. There's nothing apart. It's all about trade. And in the fourth age, which is the Kali Yuga, it's the age where every person living in the Kali Yuga is basically a sort of synthetic individual doing his chores until his time is up. And that's all. That's all that there is to it. These are the 4 ages. So, this principle of tradition. So, imagine, and this is crucial for your reading. Let's start with the general format of Evola's understanding. At one end is the individual. The individual has no sense of meaning in life. He just goes through the motions. But with time, there might be some form of initiation. And from an individual, that individual develops and becomes a person. And the person reaches towards that and aspires to that which is absolute, called il uomo assoluto, the absolute person. Now, sovereignty is that which is absolute. That which is individual has no sovereignty at all. It's totally dependent on the masses, one with, more of the same, homogeneous, if you will, one of so many. There is no particular characteristic which defines that person as different from any other person in the group. It is the herd. That's the individual. Okay? The person, on the other hand, according to Evola, is that which has defined himself and is on the path to a certain quality in his life. There is a differentiation. A certain skill is being developing. A certain sense of personhood. Now, this passage can be taken either through the wet part, the part of activism in the world, or the dry part. Let me give you an example. The part of seclusion, the part of the sannyas, of the sannyasin, the renunciate, the meditator, the Buddhist monk, they're all the dry part. The wet part is the part of the warrior, of the noble aristocrats. But these noble aristocrats are not those that pay tribute to those who are under them, those who are the individuals, who have no individuality, no personhood, to put it precisely, but look up towards that which is sovereign. So the tradition that Evola speaks a lot about stands for a system of values which are unchanging. They are changeless. They stand in virtue of their own. They don't need any sense of reference. Do you understand? So, this tradition obeys the rules of hierarchy, of liberty, of order, of obedience. This is what the tradition is about. It is an expression of the absolute. The absolute is timeless, not involved, but not silent in the sense of Guénon, his contemporary philosopher, but very much involved in the sense of the tradition being like a beacon to all those who have risveglio, who has awakened to the principle of hierarchy, of liberty. Am I clear? Would anyone would like to pose a question?
So when you speak of tradition with a capital T,
Yeah?
would that be the equivalent of, let's say, logos in the Christian tradition?
One has to be careful with trying to merge Christianity into this arena. Why? Because if I had to give my opinion is one thing, but I am the voice here of Evola, and Evola is not that sympathetic towards the Catholic Christian tradition at all. You see, he's not. He doesn't go. He's not. How would I put it? To be precise, he doesn't rule out the Christian tradition, but he is more involved in that which is supernatural, in a history which is cyclical, not a history which is linear and progressive. You understand?
Can I just clarify? So when I say I don't mean the Christian tradition as Christianity itself, but the logos, in other words, the word of God. So we have scripture, we've been given the word, we know what it is in terms of how to better ourselves, how to bring ourselves forward into the world to create a better world. Would it be the same as the tradition with the capital T?
Not quite, no. Because the Christian tradition has one book, which is the Bible. The Buddhist and Hindu and the other philosophies of life don't have one book, they have a library. So it's vast. You understand? And the metaphysics, the philosophy behind it, is quite separate. We tend to lump everything all together in one pot, which is wrong. Because if we do that, we lose that which is particular, which is distinct. And we have to be careful, because at the age of the Kali Yuga, we tend to lump everything all together in one pot, in one homogeneous mass. It's not like that at all. You understand this? So I'm not saying that the Christian has no place in this philosophy. Yes. But the idea of history is completely different. You don't have the forecasts, as Evola speaks in the Christian tradition like. So these are already two major difficulties, right? Okay?
In Evola's philosophy, is it possible that someone who is part of the collective, with a meaningless life, can, through spiritual transcendence, evolve into the purposeful individual who can fight against the age of darkness and ignorance? What was Evola's view on this?
Thank you very much. Very good question. So, what conduct, what mode of existence? That's the first question, remember?
Yes, correct.
What is our attitude? How should we go about this? And I'll end with this. At the end of his writing career in the early 70s, he had come to an understanding, Evola, that the age of decadence is a very advanced stage, and it's unremitting. So the position is one which one takes internally rather than externally. So as you go about in your life, whatever that life happens to be, the idea is that you remain true to the principles through the principles of hierarchy, through the principles of obedience, through the principles of loyalty, nobility. You understand?
Yes.
So, and this is very important, though you are involved in life, and most of us are involved, we are activists in some way or another because we are in the humdrum of life. We go about doing our life, but we always remain detached from it. We always take that step back and don't associate who we are with what we do. We don't associate who we are with what we do. It's very easy to associate who I am with my doing. If I'm an author, it's very easy for me to associate my sense of being with writing books. All right? And seeing how many likes I get on Facebook. Or how many sales. How many did I manage to sell this month? How is my competition doing? It has nothing to do with this. I have to be truthful to the principle of liberty. What liberty is, according to the principles of tradition. Which is totally different from how we understand liberty nowadays. Yes?
You mentioned that Evola has this view of history, which is cyclic as opposed to linear.
Sorry, come forward because you're a bit too far.
You mentioned that Evola has this view of history, which is more cyclic rather than linear.
Yes.
Is this similar to like Oswald Spengler's view of history?
I would prefer personally to take Evola for what he is, rather than trying to compare him to other philosophers. If you have to do this, try to stay within the boundaries of his writing, like Nietzsche, for instance. Let me give you an example. Nietzsche would say something like this: you call yourself free. Your dominating thought I want to hear. Not that you have escaped from slavery. Do you think you have the right to be free? Free from what? What does Zarathustra care? This is from Zarathustra. So as you see, there are parallels here between the idea of liberty and freedom and the idea that Evola evolves, because Evola evolves the thinking of Nietzsche to a higher level. Like, he questions the idea of freedom for all his readers. You call yourself free. He's addressing everybody. You call yourself free. You call yourself free. I call myself free. Evola would say exactly the same thing, would propose the same question to all of us. Okay? Your dominating thought I want to hear. What actually goes on in here? Every minute of the day. Is it trying to make a deal? Trying to earn money? Investing? Is it about climbing the ladder of power? Is this our idea of freedom? You see the parallels here between Nietzsche and Evola. Evola's quoting Nietzsche here. Okay? Your dominating thought I want to hear. And then, following this, in another verse, Nietzsche would say, your dominating thought I want to hear. Some people have lost their last value when they lost their servitude. What servitude is Nietzsche talking about? Through Zarathustra. Service towards that which is absolute. Service towards the tradition. Because if we say we are free, meaning that we do what the heck we like, we don't have any boundaries, we don't have any rule of conduct, that is freedom. That is not freedom at all. That is libertinism. That is not liberty. Liberty is when you are obedient to that which is absolute, to that which is principled, to that which is changeless, timeless. That animates all our life. So Zarathustra wouldn't care. You're still in bondage. You're still there. You got it. So Evola takes the nihilism of Nietzsche and turns this 180 degrees into an activism. Be involved in the world, but do not be part of it. Be detached. This is the conduct. Remember that in Cavalcare la Tigre, Ride the Tiger, and I'll end with this, his question is, what conduct? What mode of existence? Okay? For that particular type of individual. That particular type, rather that particular human type, to be precise. Okay? So, remember, if you have to start studying Evola, I would suggest starting with Ride the Tiger, so that through the writings in the book, one learn to hold on to the beast, to the tiger, not to fall. What is the tiger representing? Progress, liberty, democracy. That is the tiger. Hold on to the beast. You understand? That is Evola. You understand this? Our views have to be that which is supra-democratic, above democracy, that which is absolute, that which is truly sovereign. This is Evola. Remember, Ride the Tiger is not just Ride the Tiger. It is a survival manual for the aristocrats of the soul.
Exactly.
Thank you very much.